A further means that is really key in any solid process of discernment is times of silence. Remember when Elijah goes up on the mountaintop to encounter the Lord, and there is the fire and the hurricane and the roaring wind, and God is not in any of them. And then comes the still, small, little whisper, the still, small voice, as we often translate it. And Elijah covers his head and goes out to meet the Lord. Now, you can't hear just a tiny, small, still voice unless you're pretty quiet yourself. It's not possible to discern when we are always in the tumult of noise and busyness and activity. If people know one thing about St. Ignatius of Loyola's long 30-day retreat, it's that it's in silence, that you don't talk for 30 days. That always really impresses people. And there's a reason why Ignatius asked for that kind of silence in the course of the retreat, because it is the ideal space in which to hear the God who speaks, at times just whispers in the deep places in our hearts, and that kind of quiet allows us to hear that voice. I've always been struck by the words of, this was the 18th century, so this is roughly 2 centuries ago, when the Danish theologian, philosopher Søren Kierkegaard said that if I were a doctor and I could prescribe just one remedy for all the ills of the modern world, I would prescribe silence. And after some reflections, he just has this 2-word injunction. Therefore, he says, create silence. If you're in a process of discernment, find creative ways to have times of silence in your life. They will make a big difference. You don't always have to have the earbuds in. You don't always have to have the screen illuminated. Sometimes I will deliberately, when I'm out walking, let's say through the streets of the city where I live, I could be listening to a rosary app or a podcast or something, which I'll do at times, but sometimes I will deliberately listen to nothing and simply avail myself to the surroundings, just taking them in. Find places of silence. Prayer obviously is one of the most healing things in our culture today because it does create places of silence in a culture that has very few of them. One of the things I have noticed in a process of discernment, very often when people share the story of their discernment, is that at a certain point in the story they'll say, then I made a retreat. And I warmly encourage that. If you're in a process of discernment and don't yet have the clarity that you need, consider building a retreat into the process. If all you have is a half a day, then let it be a half day of retreat. A day, a weekend, more days if you have the time and you feel ready for it. Find times when you pull away and the only thing you need to do is be available to hear the still small voice. Sometimes retreats will be the turning points. They'll be the time when the clarity that you seek comes. So build a healthy space for silence in your life, a space in which you can hear God's voice as He speaks in the depths of your heart.